Welcome to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, where we help business leaders and individual contributors with actionable insights to hit their number and figure out the nuances of truly operating a business globally today, squeezing the essence of the lessons learned from the planet's top tech leaders. This is your guide to joining the fast track to global market scaling.
Welcome, I'm Ross Lauder, your host from Single Focus Talent, and I'm joined by our non-exec director, John Quigley, today.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Today, we are joined by Riona Hegarty, CMO at Oversea. I really was excited to have Riona on this call because she's taken her career from marketing coordinator right the way up to being a CMO. I think she could bring a lot to the table by way of explaining how to go about that journey, what companies and opportunities have led her to that, how she's been able to execute the relationship with sales. I'm also very excited to have the fact that she's a marketing person on today's call, and often sales guys need to be kind of whipped into line and held accountable and ensure they follow up on leads. So that's going to be a hot topic today. Riona is also from Ireland's second most populous city, should I say. Some would call it the real capital of Ireland. They've had inward investment from household names like EMC, Dell, McAfee, Quest, SolarWinds, VMware, and Teamwork, I know, is a more indigenous company as well. So a huge hive of activity. So keen to look at that today, and then walking through some of the leadership things that she's utilized in her own career to drive her own team forward and ultimately get great results. So welcome today to today's discussion, Riona.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks for having me. And I definitely will call it the real capital.
No doubt you will. No doubt you will. The People's Republic of Cork is well known.
Exactly.
So I suppose, Riona, maybe if you would just take us through your own career, your education, why you're passionate about what you do, and kind of what's led you to where you are today, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So I guess in school, didn't know what I wanted to do. So I have an older sister. I just followed her path. Did what she did. I did a Bachelor of Arts in English and History. So really kind of said, don't know what I want to do, just get my degree and then I'll figure it out from there. And I don't really know how, or I figured out I wanted to be in marketing, but I guess I've always been kind of a bit creative. So I then went on to do a postgrad in marketing in UCC. So after that then, I mean, at the time, it was back in 2008, I think it maybe was, and it was quite difficult to get marketing jobs in Cork. And being from Cork, I'm a pure home bird, so obviously didn't want to leave Cork. So I really kind of fell in. It was like the hunt was on just to find like any marketing job and just kind of cut my teeth and get into the industry, because I still think today, like, getting that first job is the hardest, especially if you want to break into this sector.
Right.
So got a marketing coordinator role. It was actually in retail, so with an Irish fashion retailer, and they were down in West Cork, and it was small, really, really small group, and there had been someone there previously in marketing, but they had left, had their kids, decided, don't want to come back, and I kind of stepped into that then. So I was by myself in the marketing area, so it was quite tough, but it was a really steep learning curve. So I was kind of thrown into it and learned really quickly, I guess. So I think that kind of helped. And as well, what I learned there as well is it's one of a really small company, so it was like all hands on deck. So really, I kind of learned a lot of other functions as well there. And then after that, I was actually made redundant from there. On the 23rd of December. How depressing is that? So
wow,
then,
what a time to do it. So I guess for our listeners, what does redundant mean? Because I know for US folks, they're not as familiar with that term. There's obviously getting fired. There's like being, there's kind of your job isn't available. Like, maybe just take us through that kind of from an Irish context, if you would.
Yeah, so it's really, so many times we say I was made redundant, but really it's the role is made redundant, and I just happened to be in that role. So they were going through some changes. They no longer required a marketing person there. So that's, the role was removed, I guess. So then that meant I lost my job.
That makes sense. And I think this is a key point, and it's something we'll discuss on further shows as well, which is we're very much a halfway house between the US, where there are certain, right to work states you can be let go because they don't like your haircut on a Wednesday afternoon type of thing, versus the kind of Germany and France's of this world, where it's near impossible to fire or let somebody go, or in fact make the role redundant. You need to reallocate that person. It could be up to a 2-year payoff. There's a negotiation with the union, etc. So I suppose we're that halfway house where we would have typically maybe a number of months of paid leave. It's very tax efficient to do that, but also competitive. The company can remain competitive as well. So just a point I wanted to highlight, but please do continue.
Yeah. So then after my role was made redundant there, I went on. This is then when I kind of started getting into tech. But again, it wasn't a choice. It was just I wanted to progress my career and continue like marketing. I just really wanted to continue my career in marketing.
Okay.
So I joined as a marketing executive for the UK. So it was like a field marketing role. And it was for an audio and web conferencing provider. But they were really kind of like positioning themselves as a software company. So I started there, and really I think that's where I got into B2B. I hated B2C as much as I was getting the experience as a marketing coordinator in retail. I didn't feel as passionate about it. Okay. But then when I got into the field marketing role, that's then really when I started to kind of enjoy it. And I think it was that B2B tech space. It was so fast paced. It was just really innovative. And I just feel I found my people there as well,
Sure.
I was there for about 1.5 years, and then in 2011 I moved to Quest, and I was there for 8 years up until last year, and that's really where I would say kind of developed and progressed my career. So started in kind of like a marketing exec role and like a digital marketing manager, progressed then up to a campaign program manager, then got promoted to being the manager of that team, then kind of expanded my focus to become a senior manager within the marketing team, and then was promoted to be the marketing director of the EMEA region. And then I also took on the Latin America region as well. So kind of kept progressing as I went on to take on more responsibility. And probably one of the great things is I got to do every job I did when I left Quest last year. I had then done every job within the marketing team, which was really helped me in my leadership role.
So from a marketing standpoint, I guess what would be helpful to kind of understand is the progression of how you reach people. So we've had people on the show so far. We've talked about sales prospecting. We've talked about how we used to, phone people back when that used to work, versus the kind of email cadence, social media cadence. Would you maybe just take us through the kind of shift of what that used to look like? And you'll excuse the crudity of my example here. Back in the day, you used to send a field sales guy out with a brochure under his arm and say, best of luck, go knock on some doors and tell the world how great we are. And it was all about print, and it was all about brand and things like that. I mean, I worked at HubSpot, and brand was the dirtiest word in there, because they're like, okay, well, can you show me the metrics behind your brand and how it's been great and how that's led to ROI? And people are like, oh, I don't know. So maybe if you could tell us kind of the shift. I'm very interested in your digital marketing piece, because a lot of that is highly trackable. You can then literally feed it into Salesforce to a closed deal, etc. And also, please, by all means, take the gloves off and tell us about the sales guys not following up on those, and what that shift has looked like for you and for them.
Yeah, loads of so much to talk about there, on all of that. So, and it's actually really interesting, right? Because last year, so in 2019, so I've been in like the corporate world for, my entire career pretty much, except for last July when I actually left to now take up my position in Oversea. But Oversea is very much in the startup scale-up world. And I mean, there was no marketing before then. So it's just, I even in the last year, the amount of reflection I've done on this to even see the differences between what I did in, say, my corporate role versus now is really interesting. So I think going back to where you started in terms of the progression, like, it's funny how I see we're almost making a shift now. So talking even again is like, looking at print what it was years ago with a brochure. Like, funny enough, that's actually coming back now because the digital world is so swamped and we all get about 1 million emails and there's so much content online.
Really?
You know, that a lot of the times what we've seen, and what we did at Quest a good bit as well, is, you know, send a handwritten personalized letter, or, you know, send kind of like, what do we used to call them, like care packages or things like that. And actually, when I was in my Quest role, I got a handwritten postcard from a promotions company, and it just said, "Hi, Rena, you know, if you're ever interested," and I kept it for ages, and I still remember it, and, you know, it just really resonated with me, you know.
Yeah,
So that's just one area. Say that again?
I was going to say, I almost steal that idea. It's a very innovative one. It's all about kind of breaking through the norm of what's out there, because people are overwhelmed,
Exactly,
right?
Yeah. And standing out. And you know what? So look, you know, to your point there, right? Digital marketing practices and tactics. I mean, I could talk so long around all the areas in which kind of like the avenues in which kind of we deliver messages now. But one of the biggest things that I've kind of realized since leaving is that I actually think there's too much of a focus on the tactics. Like, we're you know, so mindful now of, or so, I guess, caught up with how do we get in front of our audience, that we actually don't stop to say, okay, thinking about the message we're actually putting there, and actually saying, what do they want to hear? How do they want to receive it? What do they truly care about? And why should they care? And I think it's only from going to oversee that it really made me step back to say, like, why should they care? Like, instead of actually deciding, okay, should it be a white paper? Should it be a trial? Like, what do they really want to care about? So I think it's about, now, I think marketing, there's so much noise out there that I think to really stand out from the noise, it's really focusing on the why would they care, and delivering like compelling content. Like, and that can be through any means, whether it is trying to cut through the noise by going back to the traditional route, or doing your traditional channels like, you know, social, you know, syndicating content online, you know, advertising, you know, so many tactics. But I think the tactics need to come second, whereas too often I think they come first.
Interesting.
See, I love this. That this is right up my street, and it's actually given us a bit of a hint as to the kind of type of leader that you are, Rena, in terms of a CMO. For me, it's probably one of the most pivotal and important roles in the entire organization. And, you know, so some CMOs are very focused on corporate marketing. Some are very focused on the tactical, in the weeds stuff, right, around the execution. Some are focused and really good at kind of demand gen and, you know, the content piece and all of that kind of stuff. But I think particularly in this crisis, right, I think the most important thing is for marketeers and, you know, CMOs to be hyper focused on the customer facing problems and challenges, and what that value proposition kind of represents, you know, because the buyer's journey doesn't follow a linear course.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, it's really about revenue attribution. If you don't have revenue attribution, you're kind of exposed because you're unable to allocate time, money, resources to the marketing efforts that produce top line results. So if you can't quantify the collective impact of marketing touch points, then you're kind of left guessing, right? So for me, what do you guys do in terms of marketing, in terms of revenue attribution in general, attributing you know, every piece of revenue that happens in the organization to particularly marketing activities and marketing contribution? Have you guys cracked that yet, or is it a work in progress? Or
well, I would say in oversee, it's definitely, I think actually it's always a work in progress, because
right,
I think it's you know, it's very, very difficult to get it right. But that is something, like, I think marketing do get a bad rap, and it especially kind of really, it's awful when you know the value, but it's sometimes seen as fluffy, you know. And that's why, like, my main thing is to be able to attribute value. But then I think you've got to be really cautious and careful, because I think in too many organizations as well, again, the KPIs and the metrics can come first. Like, you know, sometimes, oh God, we have to hit, you know, 1,000 leads this month. And then all of a sudden it just becomes filling the funnel with crap, rather than actually saying, look, let's finish with quality, you know, making sure it's the right metrics are going to, the metrics and the KPIs will drive the right behavior, you know.
They always say not everything that matters can be measured, and not everything that's measured matters.
And I think that's a fair point, in that, like, there's some things that are difficult, like, you know, PR and analyst engagement, like that's something we're doing a huge amount of stuff on media outreach at the moment, but it is hard to measure because but you know, but it's then agreeing up front like what those KPIs are and benchmarks and milestones along the way, so that you always, before you start anything, is nail, okay, what's our expectations, what does success look like? And some of those might have to be softer KPIs, but like the way I would look at, and so what we do, and when I came into Oversee, was, okay, starting with, I guess this was my approach, and this is how I would take the approach, is starting with, why should people care? You know, understanding, what are we doing? Who are we? Why should you care? Then the next thing down, which is something I never did in Quest, and this is also, which I can talk about in a minute, is probably why there's such a disconnect, I think, sometimes between sales and marketing, is I never spoke to customers and then asked them, said to them, okay, this is why I think you care. You tell me now if you agree with it, and if this is really what the situation is, and these are the pains you encounter. So in Oversee, that was the next thing I did, was, you know, built a really good relationship with some of our key customers who I would talk to almost on a weekly basis. And now, you know, we'd have the crack and have the chats, you know, as well. And then once then you kind of get that established, then start building, okay, your messaging, your content, and then your campaign tactics and outreach. And then actually building in, okay, how can I show value here? What are my targets? Working really closely with sales to say, okay, what is the revenue target? And working back benchmarks, conversions, so that you can say, okay, to get to that revenue number, we need to get to X amount of leads, X amount of web traffic, but letting those be like, not kind of like your live or die by, but letting those be your indicators, whether you're on course or off course, so that you're constantly staying true to your why and the customer, rather than letting the benchmarks lead you or the KPIs lead you, if that makes sense.
So
it is, yeah. I mean, for me, it's all been the kind of triangle of the voice of the customer, product development, and sales engineering as well. So, you know, you develop that go-to-market based on, and that sales engineering piece based on how people buy. But another important thing, I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, to understand the sentiment, and you mentioned, you know, you might make an allocation of some of your marketing spend on the PR piece or whatever, and that can be hugely important depending on how people buy, where they hang out, what they expect, etc. More in some companies than other companies, but you know, it's just it's really important to understand the behavior. What are people actually doing, more so than what are they saying? Because sometimes people, when you talk to customers and you talk to people, they tell you sometimes that this is what they would do, or this is how you know, how they go about things. But really, it's about how are they behaving, and what are they doing to solve some of the problems that your stuff solves. Would you agree or disagree?
I do, yeah. And sometimes they might not know themselves, you know, which is difficult. So I think sometimes it can be
True.
difficult to really get to the heart of that. You're right, yeah. But it's, and that's why there's so many different metrics that I would now look at that I probably haven't before, and it does all center around that customer behavior. So one is talking to them and engaging with them, and, you know, sharing the stuff with them and then getting their feedback on it, but also like looking at like user metrics as well, like what are they using, how are they using it, like even with our software, like seeing, are they doing what they say they're doing, you know, and talking about all aspects of the business as well, jumping on like when, or calls where like our product team are having support calls. Sometimes I've just joined in to listen to some of the support conversations, because they, you know, some of our customers might share different things there that they might not even think to share with me, but that could be hugely valuable. So I do definitely agree with you on that.
So I'm really interested in learning, like, how do you close the loop then with sales? And, by all means, please share stories of, calamities, etc. But obviously you're very in tune with product development. The support piece, I think, is crucial there. Maybe just how do you educate and kind of get sales on board and vice versa? What does that relationship look like throughout your career?
And that's
Um,
actually going to be my next question, which is we're very aligned on that, Ross. I was literally going to ask you that question, Rena. Yeah, I think it's an important question.
yeah, and I would say, to go back to what you said there, like I feel I'm in tune with that now, but like looking back at when I was marketing director in Quest, I don't think I was in tune with that at all. And so how do I guess some of the faux pas, I think, looking back is, you can see some of the breakdowns in that, how we kind of close the loop back to sales is that I think it's one of the things I think is challenging is that marketing and sales are often seen as not on the same team. Sometimes they are on the same team, in terms of reporting into the same leader. But I still don't think that really makes a difference. I think it's like having to be on the same team. So, I mean, I do think you could have as many sales meetings as you wanted and sales and marketing meetings, but unless you're actually speaking the same language, I think, it's probably useless. So I would say having that regular form of communication and cadence, regular meetings, but also actually bringing them in from the very start. So not just kind of developing all of this knowledge and insight and marketing kind of approach all by yourself as a team, and then all of a sudden going back to sales and saying, right, this is what we're doing now, give me your feedback if it's good or bad. I think it's actually bringing them through the process as well, so that they feel inherently part of the plan, I guess, so that then you're all in it together, I guess. And and I think, like, this whole, I do think one of the things that have gone wrong is that, it's all about, like, marketing will always think, oh, you're not following up on the leads correctly, and sales will always think, yeah, but the leads are crap,
Sure.
And I think that's probably, from a marketing perspective, I think it's probably because we don't bring sales in early enough. And it's, as well, we probably don't articulate enough of the why we are doing certain things,
I've been banging a drum about the concept of revenue ops. So you got sales ops, marketing ops, but my view is that there's an emergence now of a concept of revenue ops, where there's a functional area that owns the operational and technical and support piece that support the entire sales and marketing and kind of product functional alignment, either through technology or through cross-functional collaboration around how do we support all of these initiatives and sales motions and these kind of things. Have you come across that at all, revenue ops, or is it something that you would lean towards? Because my experience is that these are all kind of separate functions in organizations. You got marketing ops and sales ops and product ops and all these kind of siloed organizations that are using different technologies, and none of it is aligned.
It's funny because I hadn't come across it in my experience yet, but it was actually the concept, I first heard of it actually on a sales podcast last week, and it was kind of like a dawning moment. I think, I can't remember who it was now, but it was someone in the tech world in a VP sales leadership role, and how he has someone who leads revenue ops, and under that then he has his individual, like, sales ops person who just kind of specifically, and he splits those off. But that revenue person looks at everything, and, like, it was kind of like a light bulb moment, because it makes so much sense. I can't believe it hasn't been done before, because it's that cohesive. If you can get all of that together, because ultimately it's the one plan, and, like, areas where, and I don't think it's a purposeful thing where marketing and sales obviously want to, like, disagree or to kind of break down, but I do think it stems from all these, like, the way the how things are reported and how things are looked at, and, like, setting the individual targets. And I do think you need individual targets, but I think there's nowhere where everyone rolls up to see the bigger picture and how that feeds in. Like, in, some of the most cringeworthy moments, I think back to saying, no wonder sales came back and thought, what are marketing doing is like, we were in, like, a quarterly business review meeting, where everyone gets together, reviews the quarter, and sales had, like, completely missed the revenue plan. But in terms of our marketing kind of contribution to pipeline goals, or marketing contribution to revenue goals, or conversion rates, like we had actually overachieved our targets. And one of the marketing team got up and did their presentation and said, great, such a successful quarter. We hit our targets. Woo, woo, woo. Great. We're great. We're great. And like, being a sales guy, of course you're going to say, well, like, if the business doesn't hit the plan, none of us hit the plan. You know, even if we overachieve our targets or individual KPIs, we still can't be sharing success. Okay, it shows positive indicators that we're on the right track and things are going well, but we all then have to knuckle down to say, okay, let's look at the bigger picture and why did we still not get there, rather than singing our own individual praises. Because I think if we continue to do that, we'll never get to that unity.
But it's back to the revenue attribution piece. That exercise would, or that process would allow everybody to understand, if at the top of the funnel this action is going on and we're going down, everybody would understand then kind of, and obviously it would be retrospectively, because you'd only see the impact of that activity in you know, the quarter after or the quarter after that. And you would say, hey, these are the deals that we closed, and we're attributing that revenue to these activities, and to these core marketing activities, to marketing's contribution here, here, and here. And it makes sense to everybody, because then you know how to kind of double down and allocate more revenue, or you figure out what's working and what's not working and that kind of thing. Tell us about the components of or the important components of structuring a successful sales motion or campaigns. And I know that what is sometimes overlooked is product marketing to support with the supporting collateral and all of those kind of elements is hugely important and significant in any successful campaign. But if you were to give us the kind of top 3 or 4 ingredients for a successful sales motion or sales play around a particular product or whatever, or, you know, what would they be?
Yeah. Oh, the top 3 be, like, I completely agree with you. I think, you know, before any kind of sales motion or any campaign, I think the sales enablement piece is absolutely critical. And I do see, you know, that's in terms of understanding the proposition, the value, again, why they should care, you know, what we're actually delivering here and what the value is, and understanding that value and how to communicate that value. So that's probably the first thing in terms of like empowering and enabling them to actually help them understand and then hone their message and pitch, you know. What else then? In terms of like collateral, then I think obviously like definitely need to help them on like identify what to listen for. So it's kind of like that typical battle card, I think, as well. It's like objection handling. Like what I've noticed is you know, in Oversee, you know, we've really nailed our pitch, you know, and we thought, yay, great, fantastic. But then all of a sudden we realized we hadn't done a lot of work on like the objection handling, or like how to respond to certain things. And that's then where sales felt a bit weak. So it's then trying to predict what are some of those objections coming back, and then how to handle them and how to get around that and how to address that. So I'd say, you know, that battle card, then competitive differentiators, how we are different, you know, how we stand out. I think that would be the second thing. And what's the third thing then? Like, I suppose you said the components to empower a sales and before campaign. Let me think. I think it's just then. Yeah, go on.
I suppose, Riona, one of the things I see as a key failing is that there's a massive assumption that all leads are created equal. And what I mean by that is there also could be a notion that if somebody has a white paper download, that's a crap lead, and somebody has a trial download, that's an amazing lead. And I'll tell you why that they're both myths. And the reason is that you could get a guy download a white paper who's just an academic and interested in learning about a particular topic, or you could get a CIO, CEO, or CTO rather, download a white paper because he's at the beginning phases of researching a big transformation that they're doing in their IT architecture, for example. Similarly, on the trial side, you could get somebody who's downloading a trial because they're actually going to start a side-by-side comparison of your product versus maybe one of your competitor, or just wants to try before they buy. Or you could get somebody who's downloading a trial because they've nothing else better to do with their day than kick tires of software vendors, and have no intention of using it. I mean, I certainly saw that at HubSpot, which is a unbelievable end-to-end marketing tool, but there was plenty of people kicking tires all day long. So it's really about that kind of qualification piece in the middle, and also marketing saying, well, look guys, here's what somebody is doing, and here's the nature of the conversation you could or could not have with them. And that kind of helps manage the pipeline a bit better, understand the qualification of where they are in the process. Because as you said, creating 1,000 leads could be a good or a bad thing, but let's look at the scoring of those. What are the levels of those kind of qualifications? Would you say you've kind of had that kind of segmentation pay off for you?
Oh, it's a really difficult one. And this is probably, the white paper is like, the white paper leads. My God, everyone could write a book on that, I'd say.
Oh, I remember.
It's just everyone, that's the eternal battle. But I wouldn't say that, like, the larger, that in oversee now in a smaller scale, it's so much easier because there's less people, I guess, and there's less layers. So to get that, the communication between sales and marketing is fantastic where we are now, but that's because we are small. I mean, it's harder as you scale. So like in Quest, it was very difficult. And it's because, yes, it is hard. And this is, I was just going to say, where lead scoring does come in, but it's still never going to be 100% perfect because, you can't 100% chime out or close out or avoid sending some of the people who are just, maybe a consultant and just downloading a white paper, have no intention of buying. Like, it's hard sometimes to completely stop that. Versus those people who are legitimately downloading a white paper to start their research, because we know, in the buyer's journey, like people, I think now I think look at at least 7 or 8 pieces of content before they're even ready to engage, So I think the number one crucial thing is the communication loop. So I think actually even before that, it's like setting the right expectation, because for marketing, people love downloading white papers because we know that's where they start to do their research, and that's how you start generating net new contacts within your database that you can retarget. So it's a great marketing acquisition tactic. Okay, it may not necessarily be a warm lead, but it's to try and generate net new people into the top of the funnel. It's fantastic. But then to sales, sometimes for sales, it can be, pretty tough having to kind of dial out to that. It can be sometimes a colder call. So I think it's crucial setting that expectation on why marketing are still continuing to generate white paper leads when sales are constantly feeding back that it's poor quality, and it is for net new. But also lead scoring, it's continuing that feedback loop to make sure that sales are actually following up with educating marketing on what they're hearing, so that marketing can really adjust that lead scoring to say, okay, hold those white papers back, and maybe it's okay when they hit their third white paper, maybe then generate the lead. Or
what about lead disposition? That's important, isn't it?
Lead disposition is in following up from sales.
Yeah, exactly. And defined reasons as
100%.
to why I feel this is qualified or not qualified, and given that feedback. I mean, I come from a time where every lead is gold dust, Actually, do you think salespeople have it too easy these days with the advent of inbound and all of the interest in your product? Because try working for fledgling software organizations where you're an absolute obscurity and people have no idea who you are or what you do. For me, the benefit of anyone even looking at a white paper is now you're crawling out of realms of obscurity. I wouldn't say you're into ubiquitous territory yet, but at least, people are looking and seeing and knowing and that kind of thing. Do you think salespeople have it too easy?
I'll be slaughtered for this now, but I would say yes. And it's funny, and it's only now because, especially again, it's this so interesting comparison to where I am now, where we get it. If one of our sales reps now who gets a lead, because they're so few and far between, because we're only ramping, and even if this lead has done anything, even if I can find someone who's just happened to say, like, oh, it might not even be in our ideal customer profile, they still want to contact them. They're like, give it to me, you know.
That's awesome.
And because they're so hungry. And but then, you know, I look back to the times at Quest, and 100% that, like, you know, absolutely, there's a bit, you just get complacent, I guess, and you like a certain type of lead. And I've been frustrated where I've known that, you know, white paper leads, it was the policy within certain teams, and this was decided by senior management in sales, that they wanted all white papers to go to a certain sales team and that they had to follow up on them. But I knew some of the salespeople weren't following up because they said, no, you know, I'm not going to waste my time on that. And they were just sitting there aging and aging, getting cold. And then they'd wait for maybe the request quotes, the trials, and prioritize them that way. So yeah, I do think there is a bit of that complacency in it, that they have it too easy. Now, not in all cases, but
like, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about software startups is because you get that laser focus. I mean, Quest, for example, when we were there, Riona, I don't know, I want to say they had 200 plus products in their portfolio. They had different levels of maturity. Quest was a very acquisitive company. There would be a handful of acquisitions per year. And then suddenly, you know, you're a sales guy and you have a handful more products in your portfolio, which you probably haven't been trained on, and you're asked to go out and sell there. And you know, there's different levels of leads, where it's white papers versus trial downloads versus event attendees, etc., and everything in between. And you're like, I can't keep up. Whereas in a software startup, you're like, okay, every dollar we spend is crucial. We need to see return on investment for this, and you know, you can actually track what that is. And you're also, as a salesperson, having the same conversation. You're focused in on a target. You know, ideally you're in a hugely innovative space. The product is just kick-ass anyway. It's really solving a problem for somebody and it's being adopted. That's why they exist, and ideally they've been funded for that very reason. And if you have an abundance of leads, you can segment and you can spend your time and nurture, etc. Would you share that experience, that you know, the laser focus really allows you to scale a little bit more?
it does. I guess, yeah, like, I mean, it does allow you scale a bit more, but I think then you have to, I do think then it's a case of, if there are leads being generated that are just going untouched, then I think it's a case of, you just have to look at the model. Then it's like, you know, and maybe it is just changing the model to make sure, okay, do we need to generate that amount of leads? Should we instead invest more of our investment in really going after those particular leads that are seeming to convert? And I do think that is going back to, it's finding that balance as well, you know, between sales and marketing. So I do agree with laser focus, but then I think sometimes you just have to put in a bit of a hard graft as well, you know, at times. And I do, you know, and just like, because you never know what's out there, and you know, you could be missing a huge opportunity that then they might be going to your competitors. So I think it's like splitting it 80%, I would say, of the time, yes, absolutely go after that laser focus on high quality stuff that you know converts. But then I do think there is needing to go after some of the other stuff as well, you know.
Okay,
Have
so
you ever been in a situation where your gut feeling or evidence shows you that the sales organizational structure is completely wrong? And what I mean by that is, you know, you're over there on one side, being asked to generate content and generate demand for, you know, as Ross pointed out, you know, it could be 100 different products in you know, in a product portfolio, but and you look at the sales organization structure and you say, that's all kinds of wrong, because the motions and plays that you have to develop, you get those done. Sales looks at them but doesn't really execute or implement any of them because of the structure of the organization. They're going after different type of deals. They're going after different product sets, and they're not focused on the areas that you have put in the effort to do sales plays, because it just doesn't work. There's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
Have you encountered that situation at all? Because to me, in my experience, marketing doesn't really have any influence on that sales structure, and that must be frustrating.
I was going to say, that's the word I was going to use. I have encountered that a lot, and it is incredibly frustrating. And it just then, you know, continues to perpetuate the disconnect then between marketing and sales, you know, at the management level, I've had that conversation with so many sales leaders, and it's just really, they've always said, yeah, okay, I'll take your feedback, but nothing's changed. And of course, then that just further down then to the sales reps and to my marketing team at the time, it just further creates that disconnect, because neither can understand, why are you not taking my feedback? Why are things not changing? And like, I mean, I have regularly tried to change lead scoring, where I have my preference would have been to deliver less leads and and hold a lot of the rest back and nurture them and pre-qualify them and do so much other marketing stuff in the front end or the back end before delivering those leads to sales, because I do think the less leads you get, the more hungry sales are going to get. I'd prefer to deliver less leads but higher quality. And also, there's been times where, in terms of a structure of like certain trials, like in particular product sets, there was huge abuse of trial downloads, and that by and like just had so many suggestions about how we could maybe change the sales model in terms of like maybe bringing on an SDR function and just kind of changing some of the follow-ups. But yeah, now, sometimes my feedback would be taken on, but not always. And that was what I did find hard in that corporate world. And in my experience, that might be different other places, but marketing, I had a great relationship with sales, and we were very well respected, but I felt my influence in making change was quite difficult. Whereas now, in this where I am now, I feel I have a huge input to that, and it's very much taken on board.
That's a very interesting point, and I think that's a function as well of the size of the organization and the kind of camaraderie and the team spirit, and every hire is a key hire and everybody's bought into doing their own thing, I suppose. And one of the other things I'm really interested in exploring is really having that difficult conversation with marketing. So we've talked about having the difficult sales conversation, but how about the internal difficult conversation with marketing and maybe broader leadership? And what I mean by that is, I've often worked for organizations and been involved in the process whereby you've got a US centric model, which is very homogeneous, and then you're suddenly broadening your focus into a heterogeneous market. So for US multinationals, logically, they would gravitate towards Ireland for lots of different reasons. And we've talked about this on prior shows around tax and talent, and the language is also a key one as well. But then you're suddenly having these conversations around customizing your marketing for different countries, and you're differing your spend in different currencies, you've different languages to deal with. And you also have different laws, quite frankly. And, I won't go into GDPR today, that's too big a topic, but how do you communicate that, it might be more expensive to do business here, but it's a crucial component of doing business? What does that look like for you in your career, Riona?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly being, the EMEA leader for EMEA, EMEA and LATAM, the region leader, like many other corporates, product marketing, or a lot of the kind of campaign messaging, corporate messaging, a lot of the campaigns and the overarching approach and go to market is built primarily from North America. And there is I have found it quite difficult, and in my role at Quest, like, it took a long time over the years to constantly remind people, and not remind, actually educate people on how things are different in Europe. And even though the differences might be subtle, it makes a big impact. Like, in terms of messaging, I think sometimes over in Europe, like, we can, especially in the UK and Ireland, we're a bit of a cynical bunch, I mean, so you need to, the messaging has to be a bit tailored, and also
we don't want to see pictures of the Super Bowl and all that crap, right?
Exactly.
In the imagery, and
and like we don't always, like, it's like, be awesome, we're a bit too cynical for that at times.
Sure.
So it's like altering that. Also then, like, building in timelines for things like language, like, all of a sudden you'll hear about a launch of a campaign, a new go-to-market strategy for a particular product line, and you think, oh crap, like, I mean, how am I going to deliver this in regional local language, because I don't have time. Like, that hasn't been built in now to this, and we can't deliver it to, say, Italy or France in English, So there's a huge amount of education, and it took me a long time to, like, it was constantly talking and building relationships, educating people, forcing myself into conversations, having to have really difficult conversations with people as well, and really calling it out. before it finally started to kind of resonate, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I can totally relate to that. And you're also getting guys, speak French and German, to pull them off another project because you need something translated, etc. And then their performance dips in whatever their role might be as well. But I suppose in some ways that's kind of the exciting part of a startup, but it's often quite often reality, So I'm keen to also explore some of your leadership experiences, Riona. I know that you are very akin to the Ken Blanchard leadership training, which I would rate very, very highly. What's been your experience there? How have you kind of become a leader yourself? And really, I'm keen to know about fostering others and making them perform to their best. And, obviously sometimes in marketing it can be a little bit more intangible, but what did kind of outcomes look like for those guys that you mentored and coached along the way?
Yeah, like that's probably something that I'm most passionate about, is like I really love being a leader, and I think it's something, if someone came to me tomorrow and said, "Oh, you're crap at marketing," I'd say, "Ah, yeah, whatever." But if someone told me I'm a crap leader, that would absolutely kill me, because I think that's something has like, having strong leadership has gotten me, I think, to where I am today. So that's why I kind of want to be able to do that for the people, and I just love helping people grow and develop. So, I guess in leadership, like getting into leadership, I was very like it's bloody tough, I would say. I mean, like I didn't get a lot of training, and I don't, and that's not as if like blaming anyone, but it's just I don't think there's, in that first leap from individual contributor to management, like it's kind of like you're just thrown into it a bit, and it's like figure it out by making mistakes. There's definitely mistakes especially in terms of style. Like, you kind of have I found I initially had this defense mechanism. So I felt I had to be really authoritative and not show vulnerability. And I adopted my same style with everybody. But like quite quickly, I saw conflict there. So like the Ken Blanchard training that we did do, which was all around like identifying the different style to the different task rather than the person, I think was really helpful. So having some of those frameworks really did help me along the way. But a lot of it, I would say as well, was, I would say, even trial and error, and which was awful for me. And that's why now as a leader, some of the things that I am very conscious of, and especially in Quest where I had a much bigger team, was like really open, honest communication, like really having that conversation very quickly, immediately and early on to say, where do you want to go in your career and what are your career aspirations, and having those conversations at a quarterly basis. Because sometimes people might actually, and I had team members like this, they said, you know what, I'm happy where I am, I just want to continue. And that's totally fine, things might change, but at least then okay, that's where I need to support them. But otherwise, other times then you might have team members who say, I want to get into people management, or I want to get into product marketing. And at least then where people are at, so then you can know how to help them in that journey. But also it's like quite quickly understanding like how they like to work, what's their preferred style. Some people might need a bit more support and kind of like that softer kind of like have more personal side, or other people then just want to straight get down to business. So I think that from a leadership perspective, I learned that pretty quickly on, is like to understand people's career aspirations and how they like to be managed, I guess, and interact, and then adapt your style that way.
Okay. And would you have any advice for anyone who's looking to become a leader? How do you go about taking that step? And maybe what does that look like in marketing?
I think that, like, in terms of someone getting into leadership, what would be the one thing I would say? I would say, like, build a network. I would say if you want to get into leadership, like, talk to other leaders about leadership and understand their pitfalls, and the things, their recommendation and advice, and even like to start demonstrating some of those skills and abilities now before you even go for that job. So that, because like leadership, you don't have to be a manager, officially to be a leader, and I think a lot of the times leadership roles, like any role I've gotten, I've always started doing the job before I got it, and that's probably why I got it.
Makes sense.
So that's probably the first thing I would say.
I think what you're saying there really is get a mentor. So find somebody who's been there and done that and has actually bought the t-shirt in that particular role, which will allow you to kind of replicate and mirror them and their success as well, kind of taking on that extra project. And you said, well, actually, I'm doing this role now. Let's just make it official.
Exactly. Yeah. It's only like I only recently, kind of in later years in Quest, did I realize the value of my network, and support and actually asking for help. I do think there's this idea that, you can't show, or sometimes people might feel they can't show vulnerability or ask for help because it might show weakness, but like it's asking your peers, it's, leveraging your network, people you really, really trust, and just kind of building those skills there. And then I think it will help you to progress, because as you said, you'll be able to demonstrate behaviors that show those leadership skills.
So one final thing before we wrap up is, Riona, I'm going to ask you to define an Irish or even a Cork sense of humor. How would you discuss and define the crack?
Oh God, we could spend a whole podcast on this, really. Well, the crack is what I'm most passionate about. If the crack didn't exist, I don't think I would cope in life. It's hard to define. Like, I think it's that we don't take ourselves too seriously. I think we have this really work hard but play hard mentality as well. Like, bring a lightness and a bit of like fun to things that just make it so much more enjoyable. So yeah, I think that's probably how I define the crack, and I don't think we take ourselves too seriously. And as well, I don't think we have an ego either. Like, sometimes the Irish, we're a bit self-deprecating, so I think we kind of, joke about ourselves and mock ourselves quite a lot, which is, can be kind of endearing in ways as well, and just kind of naturally lowers people's defenses. And then all of a sudden, when defenses are lowered, it opens other people up to have a bit more fun.
That's a great way of describing it. I think we're kind of almost instant rapport builders in that regard. And I think, sometimes cross-culturally, I think we may have some challenges when people try to decipher sarcasm versus reality, whether we're actually being serious at this moment, or maybe, are we trying to have a poke or a go here,
That's so funny. I think we've all had that call, where we've been trying to be sarcastic, and all of a sudden there's silence, and you realize maybe and the US audience, like, oh no, they haven't got it. So it's a fine balance.
Yeah, indeed. My job could be on the line here. I'm not sure. Well, look, Riona, I really want to thank you for your time today. I think you've added a tremendous amount of value to our listeners, and I think it's been an exciting career journey that I've certainly followed with great interest. So really appreciate you joining us in today's discussion.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, take care.
Thanks a million. Bye.
You've been listening to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, designed for both established and aspiring career-focused tech rock stars, as well as helping leadership figure out how to speak global in today's multicultural world. For further details, check out sf-talent.com.